All right, we are live. Hi, everyone. This is Amanda with the Center on Brain Injury Research and Training. We are honored today to have Dr. Jean Blosser join us to be talking about the tools for building collaborative partnerships. Um, just a couple of little logistic things. You'll notice that none of you really have an option to talk during the webinar, but we do really want to hear from you. So if you look on the right-hand side as you've logged in, there's a little chat symbol, the second little box down, and I'd love to hear from you. So feel free to go ahead and pop in there. I see there's so many of you who are already saying hi and hello. So yes, we are started. We're looking forward to hearing from you. And I'm going to let Jean introduce herself and turn this over to her. All right, Jean, thank you so much.
Hello, I'm very excited to be with you for the next hour to talk about some tools for collaborating with our partners when working with traumatic brain injury. And I think you'll find that some of the tools that I present would be helpful with other clients that you work with as well. So we can talk about that as we go through. But let me tell you a little bit about myself briefly. I have been in the field for decades, is the best way I can explain it. I've been in the field for a very long time, speech-language pathologist, and focused on school service delivery. So I was looking at all aspects of high-quality service delivery, looking at achieving outcomes, making sure that programs are educationally relevant, and that service, in order to do that, we need to work interprofessionally. I worked for many years with Dr. Roberta DePompe, who some of you may have already met through workshops, because I know that she's done a lot with the center and a lot of training with the center and works on a lot of research projects. We both were at the University of Akron at the same time for over 25 years of our careers. And we began working together because I was familiar with schools and how to develop quality school programs, and Roberta was really just at the beginning, the cusp of working with brain injury. And so she was frustrated. She was extremely frustrated about the experiences that children had when they were reentering school after their injury, being reintegrated in not such great ways sometimes. And so she and I, because we were friends, we discussed that a lot. And I said, well, I think there's some things we need to talk about then. We need to help me understand better about traumatic brain injury, and I can help you understand the school setting. And I think together, those two aspects will come together, and we can come up with some very good solutions for ensuring some positive results when children re-enter school. And so we began a collaborative partnership, and we wrote a book. I'll advance this now here. So we wrote some materials together, a book that you may have been familiar about, and if you're not, I hope you would become familiar about it. It's Pediatric Traumatic Brain Injury, Proactive Intervention. And that book enabled us to capture some very positive and practical solutions for working with schools in a positive way. And my expertise being in schools, I had also done some writing in terms of a book called School Programs in Speech Language Pathology, Organization, and Service Delivery. So our partnership, this slide on disclosures here is something that we need to do when we present CE, so I'll just let you take that in for a minute. This is our book that we came together on, and the proactive intervention is what I'm going to introduce you to tonight, and the aspect of what that is, what it means, and the tools that we need when we want to accomplish that. But let's talk a little bit about learning objectives. Now, if you were live and I were doing a workshop at your setting, what I would ask all of you to do at this moment in time is to write down, just very briefly, 1 or 2 learning objectives that you have for this evening. So when you said you signed up for this course, when you signed up for this course and decided to take it, what is it that you said to yourself, I hope I can get that out of this course? So just kind of jot that down, and I'll share with you the objectives that I came up with working with the center and the staff at the center. That'll keep us focused. It's hard not to be focused when you're working from a computer and making a presentation on PowerPoints. So that kind of keeps you focused. If this were a live presentation, I'd be all over the room and walking and talking to each and every one of you. So let's pretend that that's what I'm doing tonight, because then I'll feel a lot more comfortable in my presentation. But we decided that some of the things that would be beneficial at this point would be to focus on how to observe students' performance in the classroom situation, and in order to identify what demands and expectations are those children facing when they return to school. And this also applies to returning home, school, work, and community. So Roberta and I always focused on those four environments that we return to: home, school, work, community. And so when working in that environment, what we want to do is be able to provide educators with strategies and techniques so that they can identify behaviors that are interfering with classroom participation. So in order to decide if something's interfering, you have to first understand what is expected. Then you'll know it interfered. And then some techniques on how to actually mentor our colleagues, because we're peers. And we need to be able to work together and maximize and benefit from our time together when working with teachers. So I'm assuming that in the audience there are SLPs, OTs, PTs, maybe some BCBAs, psychologists, some healthcare professionals. I'm assuming that maybe we're drawing from a wide range of related service professionals, and also I'm hoping that there are teachers also. And it would be nice to be able to hear some questions and comments as you go along, and that's what Amanda's going to help us with too. Then she's going to be pulling those questions in, and every once in a while she'll tell us what the questions are, and then we can respond to them. So those are our goals, and so I'd say let's go ahead and get started with this. The philosophy, the key words are proactive intervention. And so proactive, just the word itself, it means, getting ahead of the game, thinking about everything first, and being ready. I find that there's challenges that kids encounter when entering school. And so we've tried to summarize what some of those challenges are. So I've got them on this slide. One is just the impairments themselves as a result of brain injury. The impairments interfere with learning. They may interfere with speech, mobility, all sorts of social emotional problems. And so all of those impairments that result do have an impact on learning and social capabilities. There's also challenges that we encounter because there's a lack of organizational readiness in our schools for accepting this kind of child. Now, Roberta and I started working together in the 80s, and this was new and revolutionary information then. We have revised our book and updated it 3 times. Once was the last time was last summer, so 2019 was the last time that we revised it, and each time there were changes that we had to address about the school organization, how decisions are made, placement decisions, decisions to help children, and so forth. So where the organization that the child goes back into really needs to be ready and capable of providing comprehensive services. And that isn't always the case. One of the reasons is because there's such a wide variety of disabilities that children bring to school, and it's very hard for schools to be able to personalize and individualize every single service for every single child with every single type of problem, and address the typical learning child as well. So we have to recognize the organization aspect of this, and then do what we can to try and move that along and help it a little bit. Generally, regardless of what setting we're in, whether it's healthcare or school, there's inadequate communication among professionals. And that really creates a lot of problems. If people aren't talking across their professions, then we can't come up with a cohesive program to provide the services and assistance that's needed, not only to the child, but to the family as well. There's generally a lack of professional understanding of this particular disability. I think that it still remains one where teachers probably aren't studying enough about it in their preparation. Autism has actually quickly outweighed the discussion of children with impairments coming to the school that teachers need to learn to work with. And so that's taken a lot of focus. And so the professionals just really aren't hearing enough in their professional training to really not only understand it, but then to know what to do about it and how to enable that child to succeed in their classroom. Family and peers also lack understanding of the nature and implications of the disability. So not only don't they understand the problem, what they can do about it in the classroom, but they really don't understand the impairment and understanding what role they can play in it. So that we're just going to touch on that tonight. We're just going to be able to talk a little bit, hopefully to give you a flavor, and then encourage you to try and meet some of these challenges head on. My assumption, again, if I were alive, I would already know that many of you are shaking your head yes. Many of you are already agreeing that you understand these challenges. Many of you have tried to encounter those challenges already, and you've come up with great solutions. So I acknowledge that, and I want to just hopefully introduce you to some new tools that you may or may not have heard about before or tried before. So it is a philosophy of proactive intervention, and it really does guide everything in this method or this approach that I'm suggesting. It's based on quality improvement. Many of us work in work settings where we've heard that term quality improvement, where we try and identify strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. That's a kind of a strategic planning approach to trying to develop a more quality-oriented service. So using that philosophy as a basis, we then applied it to working with kids with brain injury and other types of special education needs. There's three key aspects to thinking about a proactive intervention methodology. One is that teams have to respond proactively rather than reactive. So we don't wait for failure. We don't wait for situations to occur. We don't wait until everything starts falling apart and then begin to try and help. Instead, we try and identify those challenges up front and pose solutions. In posing solutions, we want to do it on a team basis and not an individual basis. And teams can come in all shapes and sizes, and we'll talk about teams in a minute. Then we want teams to exercise creativity, flexibility, and ingenuity. So we want to try the untried. We don't want to try so this isn't sort of the workbook kind of approach to trying to help a child with a particular kind of skill development. The philosophy is that if you get the right people together, if you identify the challenges and you propose some solutions, then you have to be creative about how you can make that solution work. When you follow that philosophy, what you can do as a team is to create a truly individualized program that is unique to students' needs and characteristics. And we know that no brain injury is the same as another. And so this really helps because to come at it with this approach. Now we know that when kids go to school, they have to have an individual education program. But this is different. This is really figuring out where is the child, what the strengths and needs are in relation to the school challenges. And it's very sensitive to the learning environment and the people factors in that environment. And you'll see how in a little bit. We want to consider the nature of the environment that they will return to. We want to anticipate problems and challenges. We definitely need to acknowledge the importance of other people. So this is really, I think, luckily, healthcare and education are striving to get people to work in teams. It's just not always successful. And it's not always successful for a lot of barriers that we'll talk about in a second here. Once we are started having this approach, we can apply then a range of treatment approaches or a range of intervention methods that you probably are doing in your therapies, but to try and get that to be more global and to get it to be more relevant is the key. So to be effective, we need 3 ingredients. We need partners, we need a plan, and then we need some tools to do it with. So let's look at each of those aspects. We need to engage partners in what we do. It's just extremely important to partner. It's a puzzle, and we're going to put that puzzle together. So we want to include teachers, parents as partners. So what I want to introduce you to the concept of interprofessional collaboration. IPP and IPE are the way it's often referred to: interprofessional education, interprofessional practice. The lowest level of that is working together. And so a lot of people say, well, we have teams where I work, and you may. There's a low level of working together where you're parallel practice. So the psychologist does what they do, the SLP does what you do, this OT does what they do, the PT, and so forth. And so each making their own decision on what to do. So they're literally operating in a silo, but next to each other. So that is the lowest level of collaboration. And that's often what we see in schools for sure, because the teacher's got their thing to do, the psychologist has a lot of people to test and to provide advice on, and so forth and so on. The middle level of collaboration is working together, where there's individual practitioners who they make independent decisions, but then they communicate with each other and the primary caregiver. So there's a communication aspect where they're not working in silos so much. They're really trying to do some communication, explaining to the client, explaining to the family, the primary caregivers, and explaining to other therapists and caregivers, providers, what they're doing. And so there's a better sensitivity about that. The highest model, and what people are striving for now, and you probably are hearing about it in your settings, is interprofessional practice. And it's a form of practice where professionals from different disciplines and professions make up the team, but there's a unified decision. Everybody agrees this person needs speech language intervention, and I'm really interested in knowing what I can do in my therapy to reinforce and to replicate some of the techniques that you're using. Similarly, the OT might say the same thing, and the PT. So that's a real unified decision in what the treatment's going to look like. And so even back in the 80s, when Roberta and I first began thinking about this, we were talking about interprofessional collaboration, and we always have thought the importance of everybody not just knowing that he goes to a service and this is what they're working on, I can read the goals, but really knowing what it looks like, how it works, and trying to be able to do it in my aspect of treatment as well. We'll do some talking about that later on. So collaboration is a must. This slide here talks about why it's a must, and it's a little bit of a reiteration from what I've just said, so I'm not going to dwell on every bullet. I know that you can read, and I know that you can do this yourself, but the important part is identifying problems together, using common terminology, coming up with goals together, and then being able to jointly generate solutions and use each other's, understand what each other's doing. So a simple way to explain interprofessional collaboration is it's about, you learn about, from, and with your fellow professionals. The with is what the key is. The with. You're learning with them about how to treat this child and how to plan for reintegration back into school, in this case. Then we want to develop a relevant plan. And as many of you know, it's like planning a trip. So we need to think about where is the individual now, and that would be the point in time when you are seeing them. Where do we want him or her to go? When do we want them to get there? What do we need? Who do we need to take with us? Again, the team. How do we want to get there? What methods? What approaches? What systems? And how much is it going to cost? Because there is a cost. There's a cost of partnering as well, because we've got more than one professional being used, engaged, and those people who account hours and minutes and charge for them start looking at that in a little different way, but it's, in the end, makes services higher quality and oftentimes more effective and efficient. And then how will we know when they have arrived? So this is, you'll have this in your slide. This is a proactive planning process. There's 4 major phases. So we pre-plan, and there's a lot that goes into pre-planning. And it's my personal opinion that not enough time is taken in the pre-planning phase, where we really try and understand. We really try and take a look at all of the information and data that's been produced. We really give assessments that are going to lead to positive recommendations. So if I was going to look at my oval shape here, I'd say pre-planning is something that I'd like you to think about concentrating on in your site. What are we doing? Are we really pre-planning enough? And it's not just pre-planning at the point of the injury, but it's pre-planning at every phase. So this proactive planning method is at every transition that comes up. So there's a transition from hospital to home, to healthcare to school, and entering into school, but then every single grade, every single teacher, every single subject, there's transitions that need to go on. So we want to think about that enormous aspect of transition and the need to really have things in place, plans in place in the right way in order to make it effective and individualized for the child. Then we do have to sit down and do the plan. I really have a bias against the way most planning is done, because it's unfortunately we're all rushed for time, so it's a group meeting maybe, and I'd say that people do what I call a sandwich plan. So planning, so they, the psychologist gives their report, and everybody else is kind of sitting around getting ready for their report mentally, so they're only half listening. And then the speech language pathologist gives her report and makes some key points, and then the OT makes their report, and then PT makes their report, and so on and so forth. The parent is trying to absorb all of it. Very difficult for them to absorb any of it. And then when you throw a teacher in there who's new to all of this, and maybe a new type of student that they're encountering, they're way off. And so all we have is a bunch of summary sandwich, but we really don't have an effective way of looking at the whole child. And so this method of planning says we really need to look at the whole child together and talk to each other. That's at the start of it. And then we've got an implementation phase, of course, where we look. Is it working? How's it working? And then the evaluation. I'm going to speed along a little bit because you can read this, and I don't want to get stuck on places and not get to some of the materials. You need to be prepared to discuss the adverse effect in terms of the impact of the TBI on learning. And that's one of the things that the schools look for the type of service that they can provide, and that's based on the impact of the TBI on the specific learning. And the ways we can measure that is through some of these aspects. I'm going to pause. Are there any questions that anybody would like to ask very quickly? 1 or 2 questions. Okay, so I'm going to maybe think people might be typing, or I'm not hearing anything. So I'm going to move on. Okay, so I'm going to quickly, for the rest of the evening, go through 5 practical tools that you can use that are part of this proactive approach. One is a classroom observation guide, and I think you'll find it to be a little bit of a different emphasis on the observation. A second is students' strengths and needs and the skills that they need to transition and have learning in order to get learning success. A third is skills needed for effective communication, because we know that learning is based on communication, interactive communication. And so communication problems are very big in terms of interfering with success. Then I'm going to provide some instructional strategies and then a summary school reintegration planning guide. So some of these are embedded in slides, and then a few of them were a handout that you should have gotten. So we'll make sure, I think they were emailed to you. So when we observe, oftentimes it's typical that people observe the student. When they go in, they say, I'm going to do a classroom observation. And they knock, knock, teacher, I'd like to observe the student in class. And then when you're there, what you're watching is the student. So you're trying to see, are they distracted? Are they doing their work? Are they, are they having some struggles? And you're looking at that. Most practitioners look at that. What I suggest is that you have to look at the environment, and you have to look at the people in the environment, and you have to look at the environment in relation to the student's impairments. So when you observe, you want to be observing during a learning activity. You want to focus on, and this is why I highlight demands and expectations. So what is it that is demanded of the child in order to succeed? And what is expected that they bring to the class already? And so there's a lot of demands and expectations that go on in any classroom, any grade. And a lot of times we as special educators or related service personnel or whoever in the audience, we don't always tune into what is the curricular demands. What is a kid supposed to learn in 5th grade? What are they supposed to be able to do when they get to 6th grade, 7th grade, when they're going out post-secondary? So we need to know that. So the curriculum is extremely important for us to be able to assess where a child is and provide suggestions on how to help them. So we have to, but I think there's a couple things on here. Again, you can look at all of this, on your own. It's a PowerPoint, so you can just print off the page. But you want to be able to understand the teacher's instructional communication. That's important. Because as we know, many kids with brain injury can't process in quite the same way. So it could be that what we have found in our treatment of the student is that they do better if we present material slowly to them. They do better if we present material chunks to them. They do better if we reiterate instructions 3 and 4 times. However, when they get in the classroom, what they find is a teacher who talks very fast and is bouncing around from person to person. And even the fact that there's some kid over on the other side of the room there just fell out of their chair, and another one who is punching somebody else, and the teacher is so distracted they really can't tune into this kid. And then we go in there and we make a suggestion to that teacher about a way to help the child. And we don't deal with that. So what this observation guide is to help you kind of think about, what's this teacher's instruction like? Is it paced in a way that this student could keep up and be able to respond? Where's the teacher located because of all the attention problems that occur? Are the seating arrangements, like, are they participating in groups? And if this person is not ready for groups. So this is designed to have you look at the teaching environment and then in relation to the student and their strengths and needs. So I hope that you find a way to use this to familiarize yourself. Now, some of you might be saying, well, I don't get to the classroom. So sometimes you'll have to maybe do this anecdotally. You know, you might so lucky to have a teacher who maybe wanted to converse with you before about it, or if you can have, you know, some other way of being able to obtain that this information. But this is the stuff that makes kids start having problems when they go back to school. In addition to their own impairments, the environment is way too difficult for them to return to. And so we have to start shaping that environment. And as you can see on this list here, there's many places where you could start dependent on what your student is showing you. We also need to understand what students need, and this would be an expectation or a way. How are they testing? And when we're talking about modifications needed, we need to understand this is what modifications is all about. These two slides are what modifications are all about. A lot of times the only thing people focus on with modifications is make the print bigger, highlight some things, give less work, give more time. But look, these are the real modifications that need to be made in terms of the teacher and the teacher's response and helping the teacher, you know, understand how important it is to know whether the student grasps the instruction or not. So this summarizes some of the demands and expectations that for certain kinds of skills. And there's a series of these that I'll go through. And they are those demands, those skills that we know are affected by brain injury. So these are the classroom communication and participation. This is what a kid needs to do in order to succeed in school. So it's not that they wouldn't be ready to go back to school if they can't formulate questions, but just to know that that's going to be the area that's going to give them a lot of trouble potentially. And if you have a teacher who tests and wants to know by questions that the student asks whether they're absorbing or not, then we need to, you know, to draw some attention to that. In terms of behavior and social emotional development, these are some of the demands and expectations for that. It's kind of an interesting time in schools right now because people are focusing on social emotional development, and so it's a good time for conversation. I'm watching the clock. I'm knowing I have to go faster. Daily living for the OT, some of the things that we would want to have, be able to let people know. It's not just us that need to know the demands and expectations. We want others to know that these are demanding and high expectations for some of our kids. Motor skills, visual skills, and so forth. So one of your handouts that you're getting is a way of looking at the strengths and weaknesses in terms of the needs, in terms of what you need to learn. So that's a handout. It's also, I have it kind of outlined in this slide, but there's also a separate handout called Skills Needed for Learning Success. And you'll want to be able to look at that in relation to each child. What are the strengths? What needs improvement? And what is the target for treatment planned course of action in relation to trying to train teachers or modify the classroom or be able to explain to people what some of the problems may be. We definitely, when we're interprofessional collaboration, there's some things that we want to do. We want to exchange instruction and interventions. Now, the reason I emphasize the word exchange is because quite often we do the tip sheet thing. Here's 10 tips for helping so-and-so in class. And that piece of paper generally ends up on the corner of the teacher's desk under other things, or on the floor when some kid comes up and dumps the papers on the end of the table down to the floor. So our goal really in terms of collaboration is to try and build understanding. We want to build our understanding of instruction and their understanding of intervention. We want to see how those things go together. We want to provide examples of evidence-based interventions that you implement. So pick, and I have some slides for this, pick one or two strategies or techniques that you're using when you work with that student, or that you would recommend would be helpful in order to increase their performance, and dwell on that. Don't worry about the tip sheet with 10 ideas, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to describe modifications to that classroom environment. You have to do it in a way that the teacher doesn't get overwhelmed, like, who do you think you are telling me to do something this way? So it's really a discussion. It really is a shared experience. It's really like an exchange, and it isn't me coming in and saying how you ought to organize your math class. And I do this workshop for teachers all the time. And so, I think once we get past that initial, you don't know what I do and I don't know what you do, and my work's harder than yours and yours is harder than mine. And we say, you know what, let's just look at this kid in your class based on your knowledge and what you think, where he might be having some troubles, and some things that I can recommend that will enable you to work better with him. It's a conversation. So we do want to help teachers reflect upon their instructional manner and style. Again, it's not telling them what they're doing wrong, but it's helping them understand, in relation to this child's impairments and strengths or needs, what would be more helpful given his strengths or needs. Top 5 recommendations for teachers would be to model good speech and language interaction. And my favorite one is talking slower, because A, I talk fast, but B, I know that kids with any kind of processing problem cannot process fast communication. So being able to help a teacher understand pacing and what that really means, not just say slow it down, but reducing complexity, slowing the rate of instructions, repeating instructions, providing prompts, visuals, and so forth, reinforce good communication tips. This in itself could be something you could sit side by side with an educator or another partner and say, look, let's try this, and pick one that you know would lead to a greater degree of improvement. So I took all of those, and they are on slides. So here are some tips for giving directions. What I hope you see when you look at this slide is some of the things that you do in therapy. I hope you see that. So, but you don't do all of them at once. What you do is you identify which one you want to work on or strengthen, or which one works better. And so that then becomes thus the intervention, the proactive intervention that you want somebody else to try. So I highlighted the learning, what goes on in a classroom, what kids do, what kids need to do, and what are some of the methods that you could recommend to somebody else. Again, watch yourself first as a therapist, and then what would you recommend? So these are teaching higher level thinking. It's understanding the students. Sometimes it's so hard to understand the kids and to follow along with their communication. Help people learn to do that. Tell them how you interpret and what you understand as you're going. So now I can breathe a little bit. So I do want to see if there's any questions about those segments that we just went through rather quickly. I put them in a form that I thought you could use them as a little workbook guide afterwards.
Hi, Jen.
Hi,
Amanda. So just a couple of notes. So one, most people cannot see the slides.
What?
So I've been following along with the slides that I sent them.
Okay.
So just kind of giving you a heads up. And there were a couple questions that came up between the last time that you asked for questions. So one from April, she wants to know, where is the best place to buy your book?
Oh, okay. Thank you, April, for asking that. It's Plural Publishing. And also I have a little discount card that I can give you the discount promo on it that they could if they buy it from Plural, they could Plural Publishing it's called, and I think it's available through Amazon too. But then yeah, so we'll make sure they get that.
Okay, great. And I'll be happy to send that out to everyone. Okay. And then I have a question here from Stacy Kidd. She says, I'm a homebound teacher. I have several students with a TBI. I struggle with students re-entering school gradually. Schools don't quite understand how that should work. I have suggested alternating AM and PM half days. Any recommendations on how to help schools understand why these kids are so tired when re-entering?
Well, it's a grueling day in school. The truth of the matter is it's really hard to be in school. And then if you're not physically up to par, and if you've got, a brain injury where there's anything that's affecting your ability to take in, multiple inputs, the high load of sounds, high load visually, high load, just the energy of all those aspects really makes it difficult. So I have a couple of suggestions. I think the knee-jerk reaction is to think about a half day or leading toward a full day. There can be many different variations, and I hope the school district's working with you on the different, like being open to it. But there could be like a subject entrance, like one or two subjects that aren't as draining as like math and science, for example. Or it could be like thinking about small group kinds of things, entering into small group kinds of things. So I think the thing is this is where you really want to look at the environment and make a recommendation based on your time with the child and your experience. So if you're picking up on fatigue, then yeah, I think 1 or 2 hours. And but it's the stimulation. That's why I say it's the environment, because it's the stimulation that's probably causing the fatigue then too. So I'd say see if you can, identify sort of more smaller segments of things to think about, I guess, would be the way to say it. Either smaller time or 1 or 2 subjects that you're going to concentrate on that you want them to learn at school, but they'll keep the homebound for some other subjects. And it's really helpful to start introducing the teacher first to the kids' problem and have them give some input, especially if it's like the same class all day. See, the other thing that happens is the older you get, the more movement you have from class to class. And that becomes very difficult because I think about it. The word transition, you're transitioning from home to school, and then you're transitioning from working with one person who knows you to one person who doesn't, with 28 other kids watching you. And then if it's changing classes, then you have 2 teachers or 3 teachers, and you've got movement from this room to that room. So people always look at transition meaning going back to school, but transition is just like all day long in schools. So I think if you can kind of look at it from that perspective and kind of start small with the transitions. That's the best I can do for a quick answer. So.
Okay, thanks, Jean. I don't see any other questions coming through right now.
Okay, all right. Maybe some more come up. To me, it looks like we've got almost 10 more minutes, so I can go back to some things, but I'll go through this prior to returning school. So this reintegration planning guide, the design of it was to try and help people understand that you really do have to plan on everything. You can't just say he feels better, so it's time to go back to school. And so the school reintegration planning guide is meant to be a checklist like of all the things I talked about already. Who are you going to be working with at that school? Is he still going to be working with people from either a rehab center, homebound, or just out of the hospital? So who is the team? And you don't want too many people on the team, but you do want to have some significant people on the team. And so you want to figure out who are going to be the teammates. I think another a place where some people don't think about, because we all went to school, so we think we know school, but there's a lot of school policies, and that Stacy's question could be related to that too. It's like, well, what are the policies? Are they just saying, this is how it has to happen, or are they open to discussion? So being able to understand what the school's policies and understanding is very helpful. Discussing plans. So again, that whole plan thing. So it's not just showing up. The TBI occurred in the spring, and he's ready to go back in the fall, and it's a totally different school, and there's like so many things to think about. And so go to that planning guide that I provided and start looking at some of the questions that need to be answered in order to define and look at the child from a perspective of their learning capabilities. And then you got to make that in a succinct thing, so compiling and sharing it in a way that it's understandable and not a 17-page report. I use the number 17 because my granddaughter has been diagnosed as Asperger's, and I remember reading her first IEP, which was, I didn't read it because it was so boring, 17 pages, and it was just teeny tiny print. I'm thinking, I'm a professional at this, and I don't understand. So imagine what the parents and, it's just too much information. So how do we boil it down succinctly to, these are a few skills that are really strong, and these are a few skills that really need some help and are going to interfere with his capability to sit for an hour in a large group, having to read by himself and answer the questions at the end of the chapter. That's the conversation you want to have. It's why is he going to have problems? When's he going to have problems? And then what should we do about that? And then we want to establish a plan for ongoing exchange of information, because status keeps changing. Kids keep improving or starting to have some problems. So we want to talk about that. We want to be able to relate the information about students to those needs for educational success, which are reading, writing, arithmetic, science, history. And there's it's language arts, history, it's all those major things. So that's why I suggest knowing the curriculum demands. Evaluating the school readiness. So Stacy, good question, because what you want to look at is the school readiness and the teacher's readiness to have the child. And then search for the most appropriate placement if there's choices to be able to be had. And then prepare the IEP with your IEP team. That's prior to returning to school. Then you can't just say, okay, done, hope it goes okay. So there's some after the reintegration, after he's back in, then what do we need to do? And we need to maintain that ongoing communication. We want to look ahead to the next stages, because there are always going to be next stages. There's going to be next subjects. There's going to be next different teachers. There's going to be different environmental demands. There's going to be different testing methods. So what are the next stages? I think it's good if we can develop some peer support systems, especially with middle school and high school, but it's so hard at middle school and high school because of the cliques and the compassion that's needed. But some schools, actually, the schools that are focusing on social emotional support behavior as trying to figure out ways to improve social emotional behavior in their school overall, they may have some things in place that you could benefit from finding out about for peer support or even tutoring support and things. And then again, providing that summary of where things are, and always looking, is there something that needs to be modified, improved, changed in a way so that performance can be better. and then always having that list of, we now need to talk about this next kind of thing. So communication really is the key. And in order to communicate with someone, you have to get to know them a little bit first. And I think we're all a little guilty of trying to just write all this down in 10 easy steps and saying, here's a fact sheet about brain injury, and here's tips on working with the kid. And it's just not personalized enough that way. So, personalizing is definitely very, very helpful. So with that, it's about 5 till. I'll ask for questions again, and I could go back to anything that anybody wanted to talk about get additional information. And I can, like in one quick step, get the code number for that book if you want me to. It's right in my closet here, right there. So I can do that at the end. Okay.
Jean, it looks like Stacy had another comment with some questions here.
Okay.
So his ideas about cognitive rest have changed over the past few years. What does cognitive rest look like for a kid who is reentering school? How do screens affect brain injury? Online school is usually an option for retrieving credits, but that's screen time. But some kids can and some kids can't. How does an online option work for kids with TBI?
Yeah, these are all interesting questions. So the first one about cognitive rest, I think it's individualized, but I also think that's where the idea of demand and expectations come in, and looking at the pace of the class, the way things move, the amount of information that needs to be absorbed, and then how it needs to be demonstrated back. And I just think it becomes overwhelming. And even for kids, just, we know for kids with autism, for sure, but kids who are ADHD have similar kinds of, they just go on, it's really, really hard. And so, I think all of the things that you brought up they're so unique, the whole screen thing. It's not good for anybody to be on screens all day at school and then go home and be on them all night. So that's really a problem, because the United States, we've, not just the US, but every place, we've adopted as a goal to improve our kids' technology skills. So I think a case has to be made why it's not good if you're noticing with your kid that there's some kind of a reaction with all that visual stimuli, and it's kind of not doing, because we do know that it does affect the brain. I mean, it's they've been able to identify aggression, like when you on screen for a long time and you take it away and you wonder why the kids are yelling and screaming and bouncing up and down. There's, it's aggression. It's like an addiction. Give me my screen. So I think you have to maybe there I would decide what's it needed for, or is it just, are they trying to test the kid on the screen, or are they trying to have him read everything? Is it because they want all kids to be able to do XYZ with screens? So again, it's a conversation with the teacher about the curriculum, and then make the case for why this maybe not be the best thing at the best time right now. I guess that's best I can answer that one. Stacy, I'm glad you're so concerned about your student, and I hope that you can find a really good placement, a good mix with the one teacher at least. I say, I don't know how old he is, but I'd say one teacher at least, because if one teacher works really well with the kid, then that word spreads. So if you put your efforts into one subject or one teacher for one amount of time, and then as he has success, increase all that. Might be another way to look at it. So I have enjoyed working with you. I wish I could see you all in person, because I bet you that there's lots and lots of excited people out there that are doing great jobs working in different places, and it's always fun to see what those places are and hear about your experiences. So I wish you all the best of luck. And if you need any information, I think you can call the center, and they'll somehow or other facilitate getting it to me.
Okay, thank you so much, Jean, and thank you everyone for bearing with our technology issues this afternoon. And Jean, I'm seeing lots of thank yous on the side of the screen. You can see that over there.
Yeah.
So again, thank you so much. If you want to email me the code, I would be happy to send that out to everyone for those who are interested in your book.
Okay.
And for those of you who have any questions about CBERT or follow up, you're welcome to look us up at www.cbirt.org, or you can email me. I know you've all heard from me, and I'm at pereza@cbirt.org. So thank you, everyone.
I'm going to give the code real quick here. It's Plural Publishing, and it's AP2013. AP2013. And if not, just tell them you took a course and that I said that you could have a discount.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you again. And this has been recorded, so if you guys want to try it later, hopefully the slides will show in the recording. And we'll talk to you later, Jean.
Okay, thanks very much for all your help.
You're very welcome.
All right, bye-bye.
Good night. Bye.